In the case of some of these particularly puzzling small and big screen occurrences, some dedicated fans obviously have their theories as to what the real answers to the questions sent the following scenes way actually are. But that still doesn't change the fact that each of these rather odd Star Wars moments inspired more confusion than space-age joy when all was said and done. Gareth here from What Culture Star Wars, and here are the 10 most confusing scenes in Star Wars history. Number 10. Why did Padme possess a magic button? Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Even with this being the same galaxy that boasts eternally cool lightsabers, healing bacta tanks, and cybernetic limbs, some still struggle to understand how Padme Amidala managed to come into possession of a magic all-in-one button during the events of Attack of the Clones. With Obi-Wan Kenobi asking Padawan Anakin Skywalker and Padme to patch him through to the Jedi Council whilst the pair are aboard a Naboo yacht, Amidala does so by pressing a specific button on the ship's control panel. But then, moments later, Padme presses the exact same button to perform an entirely different command, that being to bring up a map of the galaxy highlighting how far away Geonosis is. Is this the most convenient ship ever created? Or perhaps Lucas simply hoped fans wouldn't notice that Natalie Portman tapped the exact same key for 2 different shots? Number 9. How could Han Solo not believe in the Force? Episode 4, A New Hope. This particular fantasy galaxy is a rather massive place, don't you know? So it made sense that there would be some corners of this sprawling universe that may not have actually come into contact with the Force or the Jedi for that matter. But even with that possibly being the case, Han Solo not believing in the Jedi by the time of A New Hope still seems a little odd upon a rewatch. With Solo being around 9 years old at the time of Order 66 being put into motion, there's a pretty solid chance he would have been made aware of the Jedi's part in the Clone Wars. What with his homeworld of Corellia very much finding itself in the middle of the galaxy-changing action. And even if he didn't come into physical contact with the Jedi, there's a strong possibility he would have at least stumbled upon the odd Inquisitor or Force user during his time smuggling across the galaxy. Perhaps Solo was just being his typically defiant self in the face of a space wizard. Or maybe he had actually only ever heard of Force users and simply chose to only believe what he saw with his own 2 eyes. He does seem like that kind of bloke, though the latter still feels like a bit of a stretch given how much of a presence the Force still ultimately had in the galaxy in the years post-Order 66. Number 8. Why did Princess Leia suddenly become British? Episode 4, A New Hope. Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia Organa had little problem going toe-to-toe with the galaxy's biggest bads out of the gates. Yet it's during one of those early appearances opposite the likes of Grand Moff Tarkin and Darth Vader that a rather bizarre occurrence comes to light, and then quickly vanishes. I'm talking about the brief exchange between Leia and Peter Cushing's Tarkin that sees Fisher suddenly revert to an RP British accent for a few lines in A New Hope. However, the second Leia finds her home planet of Alderaan being threatened, Fisher reverts back to an American twang and maintains said way of speaking for the rest of her time in the series. What gives? Well, it has been claimed in an attempted retcon of sorts that this was merely Leia's way of mocking the Grand Moff in canon. But in reality, Fisher's odd British switch was more a combination of the star struggling to deliver these particular lines in an American accent, being advised to add more emotion to the moment by George Lucas, learning her acting trade in London, and being a little bit intimidated by the mighty British thespian Cushing. Those revelations don't stop the whole sudden vocal switch still feeling a little bizarre though. Number 7, so we can just lightspeed skip now, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. There's nothing quite like the sight of witnessing a spaceship make the epic jump into lightspeed, eh? But it's shown on more than a few occasions throughout the Skywalker saga in particular that executing this highly intricate act isn't as simple as yanking forward a lever and bashing a few buttons real quick. Only contrary to what Han Solo declared to Luke Skywalker during A New Hope, claiming without precise calculations we could fly right through a star, it actually is just that easy for some. Go figure. In what likely wound up being a deliver a mind-boggling visual first and think about the logic later development, when crafting The Rise of Skywalker, Poe Dameron helps the gang escape incoming TIE fighter peril by lightspeed skipping across the galaxy. And regardless of Solo's surprisingly sensible warnings against trying to rush the process, the crew bafflingly proceed to suddenly blast off into hyperspace at the pull of a switch and tap of the odd button. Making matters even more confusing, the team then wind up rocking up on numerous different planets upon bursting out of hyperspace, despite this never actually being a thing at any other point in the saga. Number 6. How did Poe survive that crash? Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Pretty early into The Force Awakens, it actually looked like fans had been robbed of a multi-film showing from the always compelling Oscar Isaac early on, with Poe Dameron being assumed dead in the wake of crash landing on Jakku, with Finn in the first act. It's well known how the original plan was to actually kiss goodbye to Poe after that dramatic escape from the First Order's clutches, which probably explains why the nature of his eventual survival was quickly skipped over in the film itself. And for a while, fans were merely left to speculate precisely how Poe was somehow able to survive being thrown from a crash and find his way back to the Resistance. But then Alan Dean Foster's eventual novelization of the flick shed a bit more light on this slightly unclear turn of events. Upon waking up from being launched far away from the crash, Dameron actually encountered a scavenger who helped him reconnect with his allies. Simple as that, really. But for those who haven't found the time to pick up Foster's book, Poe's convenient re-emergence definitely came across as a little suspicious partway through episode 7. Number 5. What can Force ghosts do and do not again? Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. By the time of the sequel trilogy, the sight of a Force ghost/spirit eventually rocking up to offer some sage advice to a struggling protagonist was almost inevitable. But the visual of Master Yoda and Luke Skywalker performing everything from stick wax to the noggin to lifting entire X-Wings after death definitely left more than a few fans with a rather puzzled expression on their mugs over the course of episode 8 and 9. Now, some could easily point to the fact that a Force spirit Obi-Wan physically interacted with the living world on Dagobah back in the original trilogy, but there's definitely a rather significant difference between taking a breather on some wood and using the Force to perform mind-blowing acts upon biting the dust. Perhaps the all-powerful duo was simply able to execute these frankly insane acts due to the fact that Acto was particularly strong with the Force, similarly to Dagobah. But that's still not exactly clearly explained on the big screen during the two Masters Force charge returns. Number 4. Droids can feel pain? Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. It's pretty tough to even feel a little bit of sympathy for the waves of generic battle droids routinely found being slaughtered by the Jedi and clones throughout the devastating Clone Wars. It's not as though the annoying collection of circuits suffer any feeling of real pain upon being blasted to smithereens, or do they? Admittedly, the likes of said battle droids and C-3PO routinely letting loose cries of fear does suggest that many of these bots across the galaxy had been programmed to replicate living beings' emotions. But even if that is the case, that doesn't necessarily mean the bots would have any concept of actual pain. What'd be the use in that? And that's what makes a sequence during Return of the Jedi's opening moments so strange to behold. With Jabba's palace containing a droid torture chamber that sees a gonk bot getting its feet horrifically scorched to the sound of screams. So this was excruciating for that droid, but an arm and legless 3PO was absolutely fine in the immediate aftermath of being blown to bits by stormtroopers one film earlier. Seems a bit weird. Number 3. Why didn't they scan the ship? Episode 4, A New Hope. With C-3PO and R2-D2 looking to make a sneaky escape from the action during the film's opening stages, the Imperial forces soon scan their escape pod and come to the conclusion that there are no life forms on board. How rude. Why didn't the Empire use this exact same piece of kit during the moment the protagonist landed inside of the Death Star later in that very film? Instead of putting this pretty effective piece of tech to work once again, the decision is made to simply send in a human scanning crew after reading the Millennium Falcon's log and deducing that the ship must have been abandoned. Admittedly, the heroes hiding in Han Solo's secret compartments could have possibly helped them literally stay under the radar, but even Solo himself notes how he uses them for smuggling and not for hiding himself. So there's no guarantee life forms wouldn't be picked up on scanners even in those secret spots. All in all, someone clearly figured it'd be a somewhat anticlimactic end to the flick if the team were also quickly captured and dumped into a cell to rot with Leia. Number 2, why didn't Obi-Wan go around the laser gate? Obi-Wan Kenobi. Even with Obi-Wan Kenobi being out of the action-packed adventure game for quite some time, heading into the events of his own titular Disney Plus series, that still doesn't excuse his complete lack of awareness when faced with a somewhat simple obstacle on Mapuzo. After managing to stave off the danger brought on by a group of stormtroopers with a little help from an uncivilized blaster, the one-time master of Anakin Skywalker looked to make his escape alongside his former Padawan Padawan's daughter, Leia. But oh no, a laser gate stands between our heroes and freedom. If only there was a pretty obvious gap on each side of the laser fence for these two quick-thinking protagonists to take advantage of in the moment. Oh wait, there was, yeah. Had the two heroes opted to hop inside of the transport and continue their journey, then this would have made a bit more sense. But the fact they resumed the mission on foot paved the way for one of the most confusing pieces of decision-making ever unleashed into this galaxy far, far away. Number 1. Why does Din Djarin not know who Bo-Katan is, the Mandalorian? It's not all that hard to understand why even some of the most well-known faces from across the galaxy never actually came into contact with one another. Again, it's rather big. However, one eventual first interaction that still didn't quite add up came in the form of the moment Din Djarin finally came face to face with the almost mythical Bo-Katan of Clan Kryze during Season 2 of The Mandalorian. Mando quickly pushes back against these apparent strangers, asking them where they got their armor upon Kryze's night owls taking off their helmets. Blasphemy! He even goes as far as to claim that Kryze is not Mandalorian, before Bo-Katan explains exactly who she is. You know, the person who once ruled Mandalore in the lead up to the Great Purge. But Djarin was no doubt aware of the Night of a Thousand Tears that saw the Mandalorians' homeworld be massacred. So did the cloistered children of the Watch and the tribe just choose to leave the Bo-Katan part out of the story? And even if that was the case, cults are a bit weird to be honest. The fact Mando acts as a bounty hunter would have probably led to him at least hearing about other Mandalorians and or Bo-Katan's attempts to fight off the Empire during his travels, right? In all honesty, this tense initial meet was likely brought about as a way of simply letting the audience know a little more about the backgrounds of all on screen, with Djarin being revealed as a child of the Watch and Bo-Katan getting the chance to read off her resume on the live-action stage for the very first time. Yet even with that in mind, it still ended up throwing up a few more questions than answers in the end. And that's our list of any other confusing scenes in Star Wars. Let us know all about them in the comment section right down below, and do not forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're at it. Also, if you like this kind of thing, then please head on over to whatculture.com and find some more incredible articles just like the one this video you're watching right now is based on, and I know because this Padawan wrote it. I've been Gareth from What Culture Star Wars. May the Force be with you as always. Thanks for clicking on this video today, and hopefully I'll see your faces very, very soon. Bye bye!